Good morning. I'm Grant Saviers, and I'm here with Dimitrios Lignos, also known as Dimitri, who just returned from a trip to Greece. So it's wonderful that he was able to join us today for his oral history. Dimitri, I understand you were born in Greece.
Yes, I was born in Greece April 1st, 1941. And incidentally, I was born on April 1st, and as you recall, 1941, the World War II had begun. The Nazis were right outside Greece, and on April 9th, they walked in. They invaded Greece after very long battles. First against the Italians, where my father participated, and he was wounded, as a matter of fact, in Albania. But then it got to be too much for the Greeks. So anyway, and then I went through as a very young, a baby. I wasn't able to understand much until I was 3, 4 years old. So pretty much the Second World War. But I do remember stories that my parents were telling me about how tough it was for them to find stuff to eat. And we managed to survive. There were 3 boys and a girl in the family. I'm the oldest. And my sister is the youngest by 6 years. As a matter of fact, when I visit Greece now, and I've been doing it so far every year, I stay with her and my brother-in-law. She has a wonderful family and grandchildren, you know. So I just was there for just 5 days. I went through the Orthodox Easter,
Yes.
which happened to be Sunday, this past Sunday. So the traditional lamb on a skewer and some other Greek delicacies. And so I had a wonderful time. Yes, short, but it was a wonderful time.
I know it's a very big holiday in Greece, the
Yes.
Orthodox Easter.
For Orthodoxy, Easter is the biggest holiday,
Yeah.
based on the belief of resurrection.
Right. So did the whole family get together for that?
Yes, I was able to see everyone in my immediate family, my brother and his family, and unfortunately my younger brother, the third one, passed away about 4 or 5 years ago. But he has a great family. You know, he has 3 children with grandchildren, and so yes, I was able to see all of them.
Right.
And that was the plan. That was the purpose.
Did Raynette join you in this?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Raynette hasn't been to Greece for 10 years.
Yeah.
She has a number of physical ailments that prevent her
Okay.
for
Sorry to hear
taking long trips.
that. Yeah. So, the war ends, and did you go to school
Yes.
in Greece?
I went to a public school up until 4th grade, I'm sorry. And then my grandfather, who had some connections because he had a barbershop, was working in a barbershop at Great Britain Hotel, which is downtown Athens. He had a lot of connections, and one of them was the president, Dr. Homer Davis, who was president of Athens College. Athens College was a high school, basically, that was established as a result of the Marshall Plan. That's one of the good things that happened to Greece as building them up after the war. So anyway, there was the high school was primarily for Greek students that showed some aptitude for learning, and my grandfather was able to submit an application. I got in 4th grade, and I graduated from Athens College with a high school degree, basically. However, the advantage was that half the subjects of the school were in English, taught by American-born graduates from various universities who came to Greece for a couple of years. So I heard the language the way I should hear it. There were some British people, so I got the accents mixed up. But in any case, I got a good education, very good education. Now, that connection from Athens College was the impetus for me to consider coming to the United States to further educate myself. And with the help of Dr. Davis himself and a couple of other people within the faculty of Athens College, I was able to submit some bunch of applications, and Muskingum College at the time, now it's Muskingum University. Muskingum College gave me an opportunity, financial opportunity to come, and they I received financial aid for most of my education. I finished in 3 years because Athens College had given me enough background, believe it or not, for me to cover some of the basic courses that everyone has to take.
Yeah.
You know, and liberal arts school, that's what it was. I majored in physics and math. My objective was to become an engineer. In Greece, while I was growing up, I learned about computers.
Oh, wonderful.
I had no idea what a computer engineer is, but I wanted to be one. You know, but as I studied more and more in Athens College, I became more and more familiar with it. That's what I wanted to do. However, because of the financial aid, I was able to, I said to myself, hey, let's finish step 1, and then we'll see what happens step 2.
Okay.
So, following my graduation, cum laude, I should say, from Muskingum College, then I went to University of Toledo.
So let's slow down for a second. So you said you knew that you wanted to be in computers when you were at Athens College. So how did you know that, and what kind of sparked that interest?
Well, being in Athens College, there were some magazines that those days they were coming in from either people that traveled to back to the U.S., they were bringing them back with them, or subscriptions. And they were talking about the IBM room size computers and some of the breakthroughs that were happening, and some especially, they had some people that were visionaries, and they could tell what could happen someday, you know, from where we were now.
But this is like 1960, 61, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's
so
right.
Very early relative to the computer industry.
That's right. This was the time where computers were at the infancy, right? Nevertheless, there were a lot of things written up, and people, we had Dick Tracy. I know about Dick Tracy and his watch and what the watch could do. And that to me was fantasy at the time, but it was also vision. One would be now was at the time 1960, 1959. You know, hard to visualize.
Sure.
That someday we'll be able to do something like that. But there were people that were thinking along those lines.
Yeah.
I wanted to be part of it.
So when did you first touch a computer?
Well, it wasn't until I came to this country, and it wasn't until I went to the University of Toledo. They had an IBM 360. Muskingum College at the time, it was a small liberal arts school, as I said before, and they didn't have computers. Everything was, you know, the typing machines and Selectrics, and, you know, but it was the IBM 360 because one of my first year graduate courses was programming. So punch cards. So they had us, and I remember I had trouble between O and 0. So my first program, I learned the hard way, the difference between punching an O or a 0 on a punch card, because it didn't work. And at 0 it had to be 0. So the concept of accuracy when you're working with computers, obviously now we know it's how important it is.
Sure, sure. So do you remember what model 360 that was?
No. It was the size of a little bit taller than, you know, as thick as the couch, but a little bit taller than that.
Yeah, okay. All right. So one of their smaller machines.
Yeah.
So at Muskingum, you got the physics degree and the mathematics degree.
That's right.
And then at the University of Toledo,
Yes.
it became an engineering degree.
And engineering science. You know, when I spoke with the dean at the University of Toledo, he said, if you want, I want a double E, right? But double E, he told me, we cannot give you a double E degree until you go back to undergraduate school and take all kinds of circuits courses and all the courses the basic courses that are required for someone to take in order to, but he said, since you have the physics and math background, we can give you an engineering science master's degree. Okay, and if you like, he said, if you want to, it's up to you, you can audit, which I did. You know, so while I was taking the engineering side, which was theoretical physics and calculus, advanced calculus, and that I had some of the background in order for me to take those courses, I did sit in some of the circuits courses. So finally, this is where I learned, you know, those days were components, you know,
sure.
and how do you put them together, what you do with them, and so forth.
Right, right. So this is about 1966 that you got the master's degree?
Yes, 1966 I graduated from University of Toledo, yes.
Okay. And that sets you up for finding a job.
Yes.
So.
In 1966, those days, we had recruiters come to schools, right? And there were, and among the recruiters were people from other universities looking for postgraduate students.
Okay.
And I did receive, oh boy, there's a couple of invitations because my grades were pretty good. So I did receive invitations to go for a doctorate. And I said, I thought about it. I was married in 1964, so my wife Renette and I were living in Toledo, nearby, in a small apartment. And I was anxious to go to industry. So once I finished my graduate work, I said, well, I'm not done with learning, obviously, but I'm anxious to make some money. Because coming from Greece, I had very little money, and my wife is not exactly a Rockefeller family's daughter. So, but we had a good life, you know, even as a graduate student. She taught English. It says English and a psychology degree. Okay. So she taught literature in a local university in Toledo. So we did well. We did okay. So, but I was anxious to start practicing what I learned. And I said, you know, maybe the companies I'll work for will give me an opportunity to continue. You know, maybe someday I'll get a PhD, but not now. So anyway, my first job, I said no to the people coming from the universities, but NCR, which happened to be, you know, I was in Toledo, they happened to be in Dayton, Ohio, and they were beginning to develop a computer system, which they didn't call it a computer, they called it a accounting machine, accounting machine. Now, the reason they did that is because I learned subsequently that they were working very closely with some company in California who was developing a computer. So there was some corporate competition, and they changed the name to protect the innocent. Nevertheless, it was something that I was very interested. I accepted the job. I worked for NCR for 2 years, and the first thing they put me on, and that's how I got to learn something about storage. They had me responsible, not just coming out of school, right, to design a controller for a disk drive, you know, to interface to the main bus, you know, the computer bus, which was proprietary. Those days they were doing a lot of proprietary stuff. There was nothing.
There's no standards.
There's no standards, right? Every company was jockeying for position, right? Yeah. NCR's intent was to make this the machine of the point of sale machine of the future, right? So anyway, I worked for them for 2 years, and I worked on that controller, and I began to learn how a disk drive would work, the concept of how I can transfer data through the controller, taking commands, simple commands at the time, read, write, position, you know, and move them into the main computer.
Was this a disk drive that NCR had designed, or was it somebody else's?
It was somebody else's. Somebody else's were working with another company, and they had a paper tape. That was another peripheral, the computer peripherals, right? A paper tape, a disk drive, and a printer. It was very basic stuff. those days, of course, are state-of-the-art stuff, you know. But we're talking about 1966, 66, 68.
Yeah.
About the time I was responsible for debug, part of the worked on third shift for the first time those days, trying to get the machine up and running, and there were no integrated circuits, right? Everything was flip-flops we're making with, and we didn't even have transistors those days, you know. The company had not decided to use transistors.
Oh.
You know, we were working with hard components, you know.
Right.
And
tubes?
And tubes.
Oh, interesting.
But halfway through the project, the vice president of engineering, I forget his name, very sharp guy, he said, stop. The transistor is here. Let's use transistors now to start doing gates, you know, to start to building gates and flops, you know. So we switched. We had a very sharp project engineer. You know, I was looking at Ernie Sheffield, and I was looking very. I mean, to me, I respected the fellow. I learned a lot from him, and anyway, he led the transition. You know, so we changed the designs. You know, the other thing that it didn't matter those days is how long it took to develop to develop anything. You know, I learned that the hard way when I went to work for Maxtor. You know, doing disk drive 6 months. Right. Anyway, that's another story. But well, it took time to change all our. So anyway.
So you got a whole team making the transition from tubes to transistors.
Yes.
Any interesting things happen there in terms of somebody says, I'm not going to do this, tubes are the way?
Well, there was skepticism. There was skepticism, right? Because not everyone was familiar. I mean, our development team did not know enough about how to, and it was the same transition impact, if you will, engineering team that I experienced later on, many years ago, when in digital, we went to a microprocessor. Because we didn't have microprocessors when I joined DEC, right? And so some years later, Kirby, it was the fellow from TI, right?
Right, Jack Kirby.
And Jack Kirby. And then finally and it was under your leadership, back at the time, we said, I was working on another controller those days, and we said, we're going to switch to a microprocessor. So anyway, yes.
So NCR, does the product get done and get shipping?
Not when I left.
Okay.
Not when I left. It was we were debugging it. We had a working prototype, quote unquote, a working prototype. You know, sometimes he would read the paper tape, sometimes read from the disk, sometimes he wouldn't, and you know how that is. He needed some more work. It was Honeywell came to town.
Okay.
Big group. They rented a big hotel and put the word out. They're looking for people. Now Renette and I wanted to go to Massachusetts. I wanted to be close to the sea. You know, I was born very close to the water, and I was raised there, so I wanted to, and we had been there on vacation with my in-laws at the time. So we wanted an opportunity to go to Massachusetts. Honeywell came, and they were interviewing for people in Waltham. I remember the night I went for an interview was the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated. So I was a little nervous because where the hotel was, I had to cross an area that there was a potential for. Nevertheless, I went. They made me an offer. I accepted it. And then Renette and I found ourselves transitioning from Ohio to New England.
And where was this in New England?
Waltham. I began working in Waltham. I was with Honeywell for 40 years. From Waltham and then Billerica, they built a brand new facility. Those days, Honeywell was growing leaps and bounds. Another computer startup company, you know. This is where I actually worked on my first disk drive. Not directly, What was the name of this IBM multi? It had two big 20-pack.
Yeah.
Discs.
There was the 2314.
2314. It was that they had 9 drives, 8
Yes,
active
right,
and
right.
one
huge box
Yes,
with
yes.
9 drives. Mhm.
So they asked me.
Now that was the Honeywell design, though, wasn't it? Or was it they were
It
using
was a
IBM?
Honeywell. No, it was a Honeywell design,
So
but
they
they
were-
were copying.
Yeah, they were
We're
copying.
reverse engineering the drive.
Right, right.
So my job was part of the team, but I did not really have any disk drive design expertise. So what they did is they had me design what they call a diagnostic routine machine. That was the hardware of that machine was housed inside that facility, okay, and was working concurrently with the monitoring all the data transition from the hard drive, from the disk drive back through the bus, interface bus to the computer. And it was predicting if it saw an anomaly, it was predicting a failure. In fact, I wrote an article, those days of Computer Design magazine, and I did write an article on that. And that was actually worked. That thing worked, and I learned how, from a system standpoint, not the hardware, from a system standpoint, how the disk drive is supposed to work. You know.
So was this diagnostic device have a small computer in it?
Yes.
Okay.
But I built it. I didn't have a microprocessor because didn't exist. So I built it from scratch, right?
Can you tell us any of the details of that little computer that you remember?
I mean, there were several large boards. I'd say 3 or 4 large boards, and I went through design reviews, you know, with the Honeywell senior level engineers. I mean, very senior. I forget what they used to call the people, but they were people with 10, 20 years experience, you know. And I was relatively new, but I went through design reviews and I learned the techniques for logic. It was basically logic design.
Sure.
But you had to know how the system works in order to make this work right.
So how did you, when you said I need a computer,
I did it.
Yeah. How did you decide this word length, the instruction set?
Well, I knew the format. You know, they gave me the format.
Okay.
And I was monitoring the transition. That I knew the commands.
Right.
You know, so I could tap in and look at the commands, and so I was able to picture what was happening, you know, inside, with the help of. I mean, I wasn't in a vacuum. Okay, I had a lot of help, and that's how I learned. Okay. You know, because every step of the way would sit down with a disk drive design people, and I said, well, okay, this is what I'm planning to do. Is that going to work? You know, so I would walk them through. I would walk them through the sequence, logic design, right? The sequential steps, and I would explain to them with the flowcharts and block diagrams. I mean, it was a lengthy process, right? And yes, it was a computer. However, it was a tuned computer that worked for a specific purpose, right? No other application, you know. But it worked. It worked, and I was very happy about that. And then after after that project.
So that became part of a shipping system by Honeywell.
Honeywell, yes, yes, they shipped that facility with. They were doing. Honeywell worked on their own computers. Right. They were developing their own computers, and those days the controllers were the size of washing machines, right? So, and that was the last project I had at Honeywell. Okay. When I was invited to go to digital, okay, by Elmer Simmons. You know, I was working on a control. That was a project section head. Okay. Yeah, section head. Right, they liked the work that I did before. I had occasionally a couple of technicians working with me, a junior engineer at Honeywell. So they thought that I would be able to manage a very small group of people.
Okay.
So there are about 4 or 5 of us, and we're working on it.
Great.
Is it too much detail?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. So tell me a little bit the circumstance of how was it working at Honeywell?
It was Waltham, you know, it was relaxed, but at the same time was tension. You know, there were different groups, and people were jockeying for position. I remember, especially the more senior people, I didn't know enough those days to get involved in any corporate battles. I mean, I was too low on a totem pole. I was trying to worry about, you know, getting my own stuff and taking a paycheck. At the time, I mean, it was, I remember some of the characters that we had, and there were some good people and there were some politicians, I tell you, and like every company, you know. Later on, when I was able to tell really what was happening, you know, I could, but it was, most people were interested to get the job done. Okay, right. So, and I'm very detail oriented and goal oriented. You told me once that I was too focused. I was focused to a fault, you know, because sometimes I got too close to the forest to see the trees, and that was in retrospect. But this is my nature, on the other hand, you know, and you can't change something.
Well, if you're going to do logic design, it's pretty important.
Yeah, that is. But then when you have management responsibility, you got to have a little more leeway.
So if I understood the situation correctly at that time, Honeywell makes some decisions about the future of the disk business.
Yes.
Right? And so were you kind of caught up in that at all?
Well, I left. I was focused on finishing that project, okay? And I finished that project, and then they asked me to go to Billerica to work on that, on a control unit for a new computer system, right? And manage, as a section head, and manage a group of people. Now, I was not involved in strategic decisions, okay? They said this is the project, and it was a brand new group. I did not know those people, and no, this I left. No, we have to backtrack a little bit. This project that I'm just telling you about with the controller was actually a digital.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So, but you mentioned Elmer Simmons, who had come to DEC already, because
yes. Elmer, yes.
They said your next job's in Oklahoma City or something like this.
Yes. Oklahoma City was what digital merged with
well, with NCR. NCR merged with who was it?
Oh no, digital was not digital. I mean Honeywell merged with a company in Minnesota.
Control Data.
Control Data.
Right.
Right. And Control Data had their operations in Oklahoma City.
Right.
And so they put us all in an airplane rather, and took us over to Oklahoma City to look for places to look at the place. I decided not to go.
Okay.
And that's my memory is a little fuzzy during those days. They were very intense. There were a lot of things going on. So that was the time when I was looking for a different kind of job. A lot of people that I knew had already gone to digital. Digital was going leaps and bounds, right? This was 1972 when I came in. And I came to interview at DEC. I spoke with you. This is the first time I saw Fred Hertrich in the hallway. I didn't know who he was, of course. But then subsequently I remember him, but he was visiting at the time. But I came to talk to you, and then
So we get this crazy idea that we should go buy a big disk drive, right?
Yes. And then that was my first RPO4. It was my first project, the RPO4.
So say the RPO4 was a copy of 2314.
2314,
right.
That's right. The RPO designed by ISS,
Right.
who were ex-IBM people, right?
Yeah.
I mean the basic group, and they started this company in San Jose, and that was. I remember when you said casually, "Oh, next week we're going to California." I had never been anywhere. I mean, to me, getting on an airplane and going to California was a big new horizon, you know. So, but that started it all, because after that I traveled extensively for a number of different companies. But I remember that day when I said, "Well, we're going next week to California." I said, "What? Not to California?" Pete McLean, myself, was Svensson, and a couple of other people,
right.
you know, that we went to talk to ISS
Right.
about the RPO4.
Right.
Now,
We were deciding, I think, who to buy something from.
yes, we went to Memorex, we went to ISS, Control Data.
Mm-hmm.
There were a number of possibilities. It was an OEM, right?
Right.
But at those days, DEC was the king. VAX systems or proprietary architecture, way ahead of their time, and everybody was bending over backwards. So I remember the receptions that we received. That's another eye-opener for me, how things were done. So now we wanted our own skin colors and buttons, and make it, personalize it, right? It's a digital machine. But we need to have an interface, because we were almost paranoid about people plugging us. Okay, we did not want anybody to. So you asked me to do a interface, minimum device level interface, right? So I built that interface and worked with ISS, working together, down to the drive level, which they also, working together with DEC, they changed their interface in order to be able to match our interface at a lower level, you know.
Right.
So we did that interface, and actually it worked. You know?
And this is the first Massbus
Yes, the
controller.
The first Massbus controller. That's right. We're building Massbus at the time, and I got a patent on that. Right, well, along with John Levy and a bunch of other people, you know, because those days a lot of people were getting into patents.
Right. Say a little bit about what the Massbus was.
Yeah, Massbus was a new idea whereby it was a serial bus, daisy chain, and everyone was, as I recall, and it was designed not for any particular peripheral, but it was designed to have multiple peripherals that can be attached to it, as long as you follow a certain protocol. So it was a higher level bus rather than, you know, so, and that's why we needed those interim interfaces, because the interfaces made the product, the peripheral unique, okay, and brought it from the uniqueness, brought it back to a point where the computer would then recognize the standard data transition commands and so forth. So it was a great invention, I thought, you know, and digital was always ahead of its time. You know, every step of the way. I mean, networking, the stuff that we used to do, talking to each other, different facilities around the world.
Email,
right? Yeah, email, way before anybody else. So, I mean, sometimes I think
What
that
happened?
company, what happened?
Right.
What happened?
So we go back to the origins of Massbus. I think there was a fixed head disk drive, and there was a tape drive, and then
Yes.
the RPO4.
Was it RS something 20?
Well, there's an RSO3 and an RSO4.
RSO3. That was McLean's project.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
RSO, it was head per truck.
Last one.
Yes. 20 megabytes.
No, it was like 1 or 2.
Gigabyte.
No, megabytes. Megabytes.
1 or 2 megabytes. Yeah, but it was those days memories were expensive, remember?
Oh, yeah.
And so it was like a memory extension,
Right.
because it was much.
Swapping memory, right?
Yes, that's right.
Right.
That's right.
So
Ahead of its time.
Right. So I think there was a customer who wanted the big storage, right?
Yes. Now, who was that customer?
There was a guy in Holland, I think. Or
Yes.
Oh, you remember the name of the company?
Yes, Infinite.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we call it Outfinite. And it was Dick Clayton that was the contact with that company, right? So he put us all in the airplane, and we visited. And they really wanted that product, and we did basically for them, but there was a lot of other people that bought it. Yeah. Okay, but we started and developed the RPO4 for them, and I went with that great big specification. Remember that big thick book? Mm-hmm. I wish I had a copy of that, you know. Not that it matters anymore, but we gave them, and just the size of it, they were impressed. And had a couple of meetings, and
drank
a lot of beer.
A lot of their super intense coffee.
Yes, coffee. And steaks. They had steaks for us, you know, and so, yes, that was, and then we visited a few more times, but the first time, it was interesting.
In a chateau in...
The chateau? Oh, how can I forget the chateau? That was quite a place.
Yes, it was.
That was quite a place. So those are perks. That's the other thing I remember fondly from digital, you know, all this travel to the sales meetings. Yeah. And customers and suppliers and all those people, you know, like the people that provided, until we developed our own product. And I was really fortunate, very fortunate. And this is the first time in all my career until then that I got close to a disk drive was the R80, the R.
Well, let's back up a little bit. The RPO4 then leads to a whole succession of
RPO4, RPO5, RPO6, RPO7, RPR02. Remember, all of a sudden you had to go back. I mean, it's like going back to the history. I was working on the RPO7, which was at the time the state of the art, right? 200 megabytes, something like that.
Oh, more, 300 or 400, yeah.
And
it was the 3380 copy by
3380,
which was Unisys at that time.
That's right.
Right.
3380.
Unisys bought ISS.
Yes, that's right.
The disk drive from hell, if I remember.
But then, Memorex had actually they were taking back those drives.
Oh, the RPR.
The RPR02 refurbished. The R stood for RP refurbished 02. Right. And it was 2314, right? Yeah. It was return drives, which they refurbished them, and we brought them in. Actually, we got some. I mean, we sold a bunch of those.
Oh yeah. It was kind of a filler product for Irwin Jacobs in the business market.
Yes.
He needed a smaller capacity, cheaper disk drive, which we didn't have, and Memorex was kind of in dire straits.
Dire straits. I mean, Aaron Cooley, remember Aaron Cooley, our buddy? And Tom, his sidekick was Tom somebody, I forget his last name. But Arnold, I will never forget, you know, he was something. So yes, now, before the RM80, another actually big learning experience for me was the RL01. Mm-hmm. You know, that we had Fred Hertrich develop, and way ahead of its time. As a matter of fact, we got an award for that, right? The IR100 award, and we all went to Chicago with our formal attire, right? And I used to have a picture of that. Maybe I still do.
Yeah. I do. So let's back up and talk about why the RL01 and why Hertrich and what happened there?
Well, Hertrich, we're talking earlier about people with vision, not to mention excellent technical expertise, right? And this guy, who you found, I guess, because he was there before I arrived, had all those credentials, you know. Hard to work with sometimes, and if he didn't like you, you were nowhere. If he didn't like you, so I recognize that.
Right. And Fred is German PhD,
yeah,
right?
German PhD, right. And it wasn't even he didn't even have a electrical engineering background. I think he was in a different scientific subject, but it was a different subject that, and nevertheless, he had a group like Shaw, I forget his first name. You know, he had a group of very good technical, small group, very good technical people. He wanted to, and he deserved to be the lead on that development. And the reason we went with Fred is because he had already proven before I arrived his expertise, good thoughts, direction, and he was a logical guy. I think he proposed this to you, didn't he? How did that? I remember I wasn't part of the original proposal for an RL01.
Yeah, we did the RK05, which used the IBM 2315 front-loading cartridge.
Yes.
And there were so many problems with that cartridge, and IBM had frankly ditched it after one product, then gone to the 5440, which was the top-loading sealed cartridge.
Yes.
And we wanted to have a successor product to the RK05. So
yes, RK05,
right.
That's right.
And
that was Phil Arnold that did that, right?
Yeah. No, it was before Phil, actually. But anyway, it was Elmer and Elmer Simmons,
yes,
and Dale Jensen and Max Sloan and
okay. I remember some of those guys.
one more, I can't remember the name. Anyway, so the objective was a embedded track following to eliminate all the interchange problems, yes, too. So that was what Fred, yes, had actually tried in a startup company, is where I first met him, and that company failed.
See, I wasn't aware,
of all that, yeah.
Because that was before my time.
Right. So you start to work with Fred.
I started to work with Fred, and Fred made a proposal to you, and you gave him the okay to start working, and he asked for a base. He wanted a unibody construction baseplate, and the agreement was that I'm going to work offline on positioners and electronics and this and that. We had someone in Maynard who was good with woodwork, right? And we commissioned him.
Mike Obuck.
I now forget his name.
A pattern maker.
Yes, but he was an expert. And Fred asked for two wooden base plates. And I do remember one night when you and I were, and I was going to pick you up and we'll go to the airport. You didn't know that I had a small car. So I had a Carmen Ghia those days, which was the poor man's Porsche, which I wanted, and I got 3 of them after that, you know, but I had the Carmen Ghia, and we got in the Carmen Ghia. It was very, very limited space, and you were holding, we took one base plate then. That took one. The other one went later. But we took one base plate. Fred had finished with the offline design of mechanical positioner and the electronics. And we got to Logan and to the airport, and we went to Boulder. We got to Boulder. Fred was waiting for us 9:30 at night. Fred was waiting for us, so I remember he saw the base plate. I'll be damned if he didn't put those components and turn it on, and the thing worked. I don't know that it was transferring data, but it worked basically. I mean, all remote. And a wooden base plate which was subject to vibrations and all kinds of other interferences, you know, nevertheless. He was an exceptional engineer. Right. And that was the beginning of the RL01, you know, and that became as we know, a tremendously successful product.
Yeah, I think that wooden baseplate is in the computer museum.
Is it?
Yes.
I tell you, it brings a lot of memories, you know, just to see some of those things. Also, later on, the TK50, you know.
Well, let's talk more about the RL01, because
yes.
this starts a relationship between you and Fred.
Yes.
And
now, one thing that I learned early enough, you know, working with Fred, and you did not contradict him. I mean, he accepted criticism, but you have to be very careful how to approach that. And if he ever catch you not be sincere, that will be the end of the relationship. I was very careful about that. And I gave him, which he deserved. I never told him, I never even gave him the impression that I knew more about the disk drive than he did, like some people. Some people do, and they screw themselves up.
Yep.
Because, you know, this man was very proud.
Well, I think he deservedly so, because I think he was at IBM. He was director of all magnetic recording technology, which is a big job.
Even if you didn't know that, just by talking to him and letting him tell you what he's doing and why, you didn't have to know that what he did before. I mean, you could tell that this guy was really good at what he did. So he and I worked as partners. I mean, I adopted, I mean, I was essentially, we were paying his salary, but he and I were partners.
Yeah. So Fred was quite a smoker and drinker and skier, right?
He was, yes, all those things. I mean, he was the 2 martini, always martinis, you know, before lunch and before dinner, especially the dinners. That's how he would begin. And yes, a drinker and a smoker. Smoking, it was essentially one cigarette after the next.
Yeah.
And I really liked him, and we became very good friends even after he stopped working. When I was working for Mac Store, I took sometimes, he had retired. He and his wife developed some personal problems, and he was living by himself for a number of years. Greg Hertrick, his son, was always very close to his father, and then a couple of the other children. I used to go to his house and pick him up and bring him over to my house in Boulder and had dinner, you know, occasionally. You know, so I got to understand him, you know, and he and I had an excellent relationship, and it was that relationship that also led us to the next very, very successful family of products, the DLT products. So
now the RL01 is a big success. There's the RL02 comes out. It's kind of double the capacity, and Digital starts to get serious about operations in Colorado.
Yes. Yes. Digital began to look for expansion. And it had to be a place, of course, where you can attract talent. The costs are right, you know, plenty of space for a new building. And Colorado Springs turned out to be, I forget the name of the fellow that actually found the place for us in Colorado Springs.
Dave Brown.
Dave Brown was...
he might have been number 2, right?
He was number 2.
Yeah.
I remember the guy's name. But anyway, we built a beautiful facility in Colorado Springs. And you asked me to go to Colorado. At first, I wasn't happy with that. And now I look back, and it was the best decision I ever made. Because it was great not only for my education, but for my career. I mean, that helped me quite a bit understand, especially later on when you were promoted to vice president and then selected me, you know, which was totally unexpected, to take over the responsibility of running Colorado operations, because I'm basically, I was never, and I told that to other people that I work for, I'm not much for standing up and, you know, in a soapbox and telling you how great I am, you know. but some people, and happened not only at digital but elsewhere, recognized that and gave me some responsibilities. You know, so yes, so I went to Colorado Springs. Once I bought into it, with your help, I were able to attract a lot of people but the relationships that I had established with Memorex, with ISS, with all these suppliers from California enabled us. I mean, I was able to call people, pull some talent like George Frenchman, Bill Montero, and some other people, a read-write guy, I forget his name, you know, Naguchi, and another guy, you know, tall, thin fellow, but anyway, I forget his name. So we got a good, strong development team. Now, the RM80 would not have happened without Riggle.
Right.
You know, because Mike Riggle, I saw him a few days before he died. Nelson Diaz and I, he was then, I was working for InPhase. We went to Luna Park, what's the name of that, where Mike used to live?
Yeah, it was near Castle Rock.
Yeah, near Castle Rock, right.
Yeah.
So anyway, to see him, just to say goodbye, because he was gone.
Yeah.
Just about a month later or less. Anyway, Mike, responsible for advanced development, was developing that tricky interface. And I remember the problems we had. He would format the disks in Massachusetts. And by the time they came to Colorado, format was, the disk would not hold the format.
Wow.
You know? And then you come and say, progress. Grant, you know, we can't, the problem was solved. And I forget now how Mike and Bob Rotmeyer,
Yeah.
how they solved the problem. But the disk was coming in formatted, and I remember there was some magnetic source of magnetism from somewhere around the drive, or that was either we're generating it, or because we could not pin this, almost caused us not to be able to produce the RM80. I mean, that was going to be a huge disappointment, not to mention the amount of money that had been spent at the time.
Right.
You know, but we managed to get it through. Once that was the worst problem, one of the worst problems that I remember in my entire career.
Right. We called the RM80 a practice product, right? Because it was Massbus.
Yeah, that's right.
Had the old interface technology.
Yes.
And the next generation was going to be the big leap.
Yes. Yeah, and then that was what was the name of that controller that was Rubinstein, or?
Well, there was the UDA 50 for the Unibus,
yes,
and the HSC 50.
HSC 50,
right.
That's right. That's the one
right.
that we were developing, that it was just like a general purpose controller.
Right, right.
So, but we did the RM80, and I remember Dave Brown was the plant manager,
Right.
and I developed a very good relationship with Dave. But those days was he a plant manager, I was the engineering manager, so we got to know each other quite a bit.
Yeah. So that product ships and starts DEC into the large disk business, right?
Yes. After the RM80, now this was the clamshell, of course, right? Did we do a second generation of that? I don't remember.
They did the 81 and the 82.
81, that's right, 81 and 82. Now, I wasn't, not long after the RM80 shipped, because that took about 4 years.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
You know, I asked if I could be transferred back. Raynette was not, she was once again looking to go back to Massachusetts, because that's where she felt much more comfortable. Mm-hmm. You know that sometimes it was a little difficult, you know, for us. You came to Colorado and you lived there, I think, 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But Raynette my wife always wanted to go back. So after we finished the RM80 and the HSC 50 was still in development, I had an opportunity, with your help, go interview Bill Demmer. And Bill Demmer gave me the opportunity also to go and work on the MicroRacks. This was the pre-chip MicroRacks. It was the one that we're developing from scratch. Okay, the MicroRacks chip was in development at the time, or the early stages of development, I forget now. And then the digital strategy was, we'll introduce the MicroRacks system, and then followed by the real microprocessor.
Okay.
Based. It wasn't a good experience. I mean, from the relationship standpoint, I was never accepted. Never accepted by the well-established Steve Teicher and Mike Teitelbaum and all these guys. I realized that there was a clique, and I was unwanted. In fact, I was told by Tucker several times, you should go back to where you came from. Yeah, you can't do this, and you don't have the background. Very insulting, actually.
And it was a new bus, it was BI bus or something.
The BI,
was
yes.
involved in the middle of this.
That's right. We're developing, the BI bus was being developed, and then we were attaching that system to the BI. It was developing to the BI. Right. So I lasted, I think, 2 years. Yeah. And then I came back and asked you, you had heard that there were some issues, okay? Yeah, and Bill Demmer invited me to his office, and he told me it wasn't working, you know. So fortunately, I went back home after that, you know. And I'm
back to the storage business.
Back to the storage business, and I was delighted when Dave Brown, he didn't even have to take me to dinner at the Rusty's Cupboard to tell me that there was this opportunity to work with Fred again on TK50. I said, yes! And then he was trying to sell me, yes! You're overselling. You're overselling. You know, it was, to me, that was a way out. I mean, this, I mean, I don't mind just saying it did not. Now, I did learn again, because the rationale to go to that, from that standpoint, was I wanted to know from a systems point of view, get some experience, see how a system looks at the peripheral. And it would have been a much better opportunity, learning opportunity, if I didn't have this constant resentment, really resentment from these guys.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, I was delighted to go back, and TK50, you know, then as soon as I went back, we went to Boulder and sat down with Fred, and the rest is history. I mean, the TK50 was another monumentally successful. Right.
So what was the objective with the TK50?
Yes. Up until the TK50 came along, software updates were being done VMS with floppies, 80 some odd floppies, you know, to send a software update. So the TK50 with 200 megabytes, which was at least double what industry was doing at the time, we're going to send a tape, you know. So that was, turned out to be, it was an essential product for the introduction of the MicroRacks, you know.
Because so, there's a 5 1/4 inch disk drive there of pretty good capacity.
That's right. That's right. So we delivered that on time, I think. We delivered that on time. Well, whatever
so tell us a little bit more about Fred and the TK50 and how the TK50 worked.
Yes. Well, the TK50 had Fred's, everything, all the inventions were for Herchik. The loading, the cartridge design, and the buckling, the buckling mechanism. I had one. I had a cartridge, and Greg Herchik gave me a drive, but in the moves, Grant, I tell you, in all those moves, because I've moved so many times, you know, and then downsized from a big house to an apartment that we live now. It's gone. I don't know what happened to it, but it's gone. Anyway, the buckling mechanism, ingenious, right? It's a plastic, piece of plastic with a hole, and then you have a receptor on the other side, attached to the link mechanism, you know, and the damn thing always and there's no way. once it was perfected, you could make a mistake. This thing, flimsy. Now, some people said, what the hell is this? You know, this is flimsy. I mean, but it worked. Every single time it worked. So he designed the head. He designed electronics. We worked with 3M, I believe, with the tape.
Right, the cartridge.
Yeah, the cartridge and the tape itself. And 5 1/4 form factor, you know, which was incredible for the kind of performance that this little product had. And so that was the main purpose.
And it was serpentine?
Serpentine recording.
Track following?
Track following.
Right.
Serpentine recording, right. I mean, all innovations, you know, and ahead of their time at the time. And let's see, what was I? We deliver the product on time, and all of a sudden, from the previous job that I had with the systems group, all of a sudden I was the savior. You know, I used to go and update. They were asking me to come and update, and in big meetings, they're trying to put us on the spot, because in the past, I mean, these products people didn't understand. They were tremendous technology, and every one we did internally, there were a lot of inventions, right? And so occasionally we may have missed the schedule. So we were always, they would not even give us the benefit of the doubt. You're going to be late. You're going to be late. We know you've done before. So I remember the announcement when the TK50 was announced with the MicroRacks. I mean, it was a big announcement at the time. In storage, finally, I mean, not finally, because he had done it before, but once again, I should say, came up to the high level of execution, you know. Now, when the industry saw what we had done, remember people came and asked if we could make it a standard, industry standard. OEM product. So the initial reaction from our bosses at the time was, no, that's a proprietary. Eventually, we worked with a company in California, Fred, who was the CEO of a little company, another Fred, his name. But anyway, this was when digital was beginning to have problems, financial problems, and finally relented into considering us releasing the product as an OEM product.
Yeah, I remember, I could tell you the story, but it's your story. But you know, you go back to the early days of the TK50, you learned a little bit about human interfaces, right?
Yes, that's right, because discs, you know, we had the pack coming in, but that was more of a mechanical. The TK50, it was a little bit different because it did require a little more understanding from a human standpoint, how to, especially when you had to explain to people. The disc cartridge and pack, everybody knew, but they had a lot of apprehension about how that little tape drive would work in and out, again, getting the cartridge in and out reliably and be able to read. So you had to go through and explain, you know. And I remember going on the board sometimes and with potential customers and explaining the fundamentals of how that thing would work. And then when we had some hardware, still, you look at that, how it seems so simple and flimsy, and it was difficult for people to understand that they can have the reliability.
But there's another model that you put new lights on it, new interface for the operator, right, of the TK50. I don't know whether it's TK50A or something like that.
You're talking about the one that we did in Tokyo?
No,
the
half height. No, it was you did the human factor study, and then there was a new set of lights. And
yes, because people wanted to have feedback. Right. That's right. People wanted to have some feedback that this is actually the coupling worked. Yeah. Okay, so we put some different lights we didn't want to put too many lights. I think we had color changes, okay, and combination. You know, to tell people that but it was, we gave them a little instruction sheet, you know, and this colors means that there's this and this and that, yeah. But yes, that's a different type of interface than the disk.
Right, right.
So,
oh yeah, so I forgot about the one in Japan, so.
Well, in Japan, that was part of the plan for digital to start an engineering an engineering operation in Japan. We had Jim Lacey, remember, go to become the first
Vince Bastiani.
Vince Bastiani, right. And Vince Bastiani started it, and I was responsible for the project, and that took me to Japan several times, you know, with Fred. Many times Fred and I was another, you know, it was fun traveling with Fred, you know. But when he sat down with his people, and very quickly the Japanese engineers understood how knowledgeable Fred is, and he became the go-to person for them as well, you know. So yeah, so we did the half height, and then Bastiani left, and then Jim Lacey accepted to go for a couple of years, I think, 2-3 years he was there.
Right. So that product actually shipped.
Yeah, that shipped as well. I remember one time now, that brings back a lot of memories, I tell you. I remember one time the Japanese got in trouble. I forget, there was a serious problem. It wasn't mechanical. It was electromechanical. It was a combination. They couldn't solve it. Dave Brown was responsible for the tapes. So Dave Brown said that, hey, you need to form a posse and go to Tokyo and help them. So I called Fred, and he and I and a couple of other people. Coincidentally with that, you had asked me to help you move a boat along with a couple of other people from south somewhere. Moving
Norfolk, maybe?
Norfolk, or yes.
Somewhere.
Yes. Up until then, I have done, since I retired, I tell you, I have sailed with, I know a lot of people, sailors here. I've sailed to the Bahamas, we go to Key West routinely, overnight sails and stuff. So I got it out of my system. I'm still doing it, but up until then, I had never had an opportunity, and now, so I was looking forward to it, right? It was that time I had to go to Japan. So I had to call you the last minute, you know, because you needed a crew. And I was a member of the crew. And I said, Grant, I can't come. You know, I have to go to... So, duty called.
Right.
So anyway, we went for 3 weeks in Japan, solved the problem, and came back. But that brought back the loss of that sailing opportunity. It was the Oyster, I think.
Oh yeah, an Oyster, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so the TK50 is successful, and that leads into some new additional products.
Yes, the TK, while the TK50 was the tail end of it was in production, and it was ramping up in production. So, Fred began working on a second generation product, TK70, double, 400 megabytes. On this one, we decided, from Maynard, we decided that rather than having Fred again do all engineering, we should have an engineering development also, complementing Fred. Fred still was the lead, but complementing, and then transition the engineering to an engineering group, which we didn't do at TK50. We went straight to production, right? So I appointed Brian Hannon as the engineering manager, because Brian Hannon, he didn't have that kind of background and engineering understanding, but he was diligent, hard worker, good with people. And I thought, since Fred is leading the design anyway, you know, maybe it would be a good balance. And Fred and Brian worked well together. Brian was had good interpersonal skills, but we needed more. We needed more. We needed to. We as an engineering group, and I felt that we needed to decouple ourselves with so much dependency on Fred, even though we had no reason. I mean, but still, we'd be getting to be a hundreds of millions of dollars now, potential revenue, right? So we should have. So I found another Fred, different Fred, but a equivalent Fred, George Saliba. I got him. I started looking for people, and I got him from Storage Tech, and he took the TK70 from Fred. He and Fred had a little, because they were both extremely good engineers, extremely good, you know. And George, of course, he didn't want to depend on Fred, far from it. So anyway, I believe that was George Saliba. He did aero budgets, and he did a lot of the stuff that we hadn't done any of that before. Because with tighter specifications, right, the tolerances that we had were not, relatively speaking, were not as forgiving as the TK50. Now we're working a different animal here. So George did a lot of that designs, and he was able to show and demo. So I consider TK50. I consider George to be the engineer, the engineering manager for that. So then TK70 came and shipped on time. You know, George surprised us. He gave us, coming from Storage Tech, they had different schedules there, a lot more pressure. So he gave us a schedule of, this guy, there's no way. You know, something like a year, which at the time, we expected twice that time, right? Nevertheless, made it. We worked back in production, was still in Colorado Springs. So I forget some of the guys that were production managers. But anyway, we got it through production, but George had already begun working on the 80, you know, which was a gigabyte. Right? Gigabyte or something. I mean, I don't remember. Or I had left already. A hedge of parallel tracks.
Oh yes, right.
Okay, parallel tracks, and different media that we're working with 3M again. A different media, and cartridge the same, but recording and reading and writing in parallel, and was much faster because now we're doing a lot of parallel data. So I'm trying to think now. When was the time where DEC decided to divest
Yeah, I left in '92, and I think the 80 had not shipped yet.
No, it hadn't shipped yet.
Right.
Yes. After you left, unfortunately for me, we got the wrong guy, you know, to run storage.
Right.
Okay.
Big mistake. Big mistake.
Big mistake.
My big mistake.
Well, it wasn't your fault, right? You left.
Right.
Okay. So now this guy was politician, but that's what it was. I mean, and he focused on discs because that's really all he knew. And he just paid no attention. He threatened so many times. I had about 100 and plus or minus 100 people. And we were working to come up with a product that he had already demonstrated that it was such a worthwhile product, you know. He didn't think that tapes were going anywhere. I mean, he as far as he was concerned, tapes were gone. And it was a matter of time, and he was threatening to kill the whole project to save money. And anyway, we were transferred to Quantum.
Right.
And I remember, and I said in my bio, because that writing this thing reminded me, the biggest disappointment is that I didn't know enough about starting a company at the time, because he told me $10 million, because he thought it was nothing. You know, it was not worth anything, right? And later on, I thought maybe he was leading me on, but I don't believe so. I think if I could find $10 million, I would have been, because I had the team.
Okay.
You know, I had the team. I had everything I knew. I had all the process equipment for manufacturing. I had everything. I mean, the whole thing would, I had to take it somewhere, you know. But no, so he gave it. He gave it to Quantum, because Quantum knew nothing about tape drives either.
Right. Right.
Okay, so Bill Miller appointed his girlfriend to run it, who was totally clueless. But she saw me as the big competition, you know. So I went through another analogous situation that I did with Steve Tiger, and you know, they just didn't want me, you know. She just...
So the backstory here, I think, is when I left in '92, I remember you and several of the other storage people came to my going away party,
Yes.
and I said, DEC is in such dire need of cash that the storage business will be sold
Yes,
soon.
and you're right.
And it was.
You were right.
It was sold to Quantum.
Well, I thought at the time that you already had inside information.
No way.
Well, but I didn't know.
Because Ken hadn't left yet.
Yes, Ken hadn't left yet, but I thought, yes, we could see that the end was, I mean, digital would have to do something, because the proprietary architectures were out the window.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was taking down the company fast. I was amazing how fast the company went down the tubes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and yes, storage being one of the most profitable businesses, right? Would have to be one of the first to go.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
so,
where the cash was.
yeah, that was not a good time for me, because I was watching all the stuff that we had worked very hard to build.
Sure.
Go away. But I survived. You know, I got a job after I saw the situation with Quantum. I lasted about 6 months, but I quickly started looking for some place to go, and then I was Maxtor.
So we were talking about kind of, you were moving the, DEC had sold the storage business to Quantum, and you were there briefly, and then we'll talk about where you went from there. But it'd be interesting to hear your perspective of how that Quantum DLT business went, even though you weren't directly responsible for it or involved, and then how it transitioned to whatever IBM was doing in the cartridge tape business.
Two things. I think that Quantum, first of all, not understanding or realizing the importance of the tapes, because they never had any experience with tape products. Bill Miller, who was the CEO of Quantum, made a big mistake by not hiring. If he didn't want me as to run the business from a business standpoint, he made a big mistake by not hiring a business person from the California industry, which he had several knowledgeable people, to run this and exploit it to its fullest. Instead, again, not realizing its value, he turned it over to someone close to him, but with no experience whatsoever. So Quantum lost a lot of time, in my opinion, exploiting the importance or the prospective importance. The emphasis of this person that took over the responsibility, her name was Gina Bornino. Gina Bornino was raise the volume. You know that's her first, at all costs, raise the volume. Now, coming in from digital, we were not used to 50,000, 30,000, 40,000. It turned out that this product had that potential, but I personally was not used to this kind of volumes, right? We're talking about an order of magnitude less, right, to satisfy our requirements. So that was good, but the emphasis was not looking at the tapes as a business, in terms of not only engineering and manufacturing, but also positioning it in industry as a product of the future. I wasn't privy to any of the internal discussions, you know, but by the actions leads me to believe that they didn't really give it much thought until later, which ironically, when their disk business was going down the tubes and ended up selling their disk business to Maxtor, and I was on the receiving end then, working for Maxtor, the DLT, they finally began to see the money making, because it had tremendous margin on the cartridges and the drives and everything, service, you know, began to see the importance and sustain them, because Quantum also then transitioned to software. Okay, so storage system software, and as far as I know, now IBM saw an opportunity because DLT was gaining ground so quickly, and the products were so far ahead of their time. You know, they were all tied up with patents, which Quantum now owned. Dirt cheap. They didn't pay anything for that. As I said, they were given that tremendous amount of opportunity, and IBM saw that, and then teamed up with Storage Tech and HP and a couple of other companies, and they developed another format. And they knew, these people did know the tape business, and they didn't think that was ready to go to pasture, right? So because of their name recognition, and because Quantum was little Quantum, you know, big companies and big customers did not want to depend on little Quantum for the supply of state-of-the-art products. So that's what I believe gave the IBM a leg up on introducing their format and making it succeed.
Yeah, right. Interesting perspective. So you make the decision it's time to, you know, end the brief assignment at Quantum, and where do you go from there?
Okay, because it became very uncomfortable for me, for the reason as I stated earlier. I had some friends that were working for Maxtor, and Maxtor was growing at the time. One of them is Nelson Diaz, who I knew him from digital, you know, for a number of years. And Nelson was vice president of quality for Quantum. I'm sorry, for Maxtor. So he called me one day, and I was traveling in California for Maxtor, for Quantum, and I made a point to stop in Boulder, in Colorado, and spoke with, had an interview at Maxtor, and what they wanted me to do is be vice president of quality. Now, Nelson he was senior VP, if you will, and my focus was more on specific tape drive, disk drive products. So I spoke to Rich Ballanson, I believe. He was a senior vice president of engineering at Maxtor, and a few of his lieutenants, and they made me an offer, and it was actually a pretty good offer. I already liked Boulder, you know, so it was a good opportunity for me for a number of reasons to go back to Boulder, and this is where we lived. The job was in Longmont, of course. This is where Maxtor headquarters were. So that's what I did. I went back and worked in quality, reporting to Nelson Diaz. And that's another type of experience. Up until then, I did not have that kind of experience and I remember, you know, then it was so many new lessons for me, like 6-month schedules for a new disk drive. And if you missed it, in this business, if you missed it by 2 weeks, you'd be, you're behind the 8th ball, you know, because other people, they would satisfy customer requirements. The disk drives at the time are beginning to become commodities also, you know. So we had to get the next, and was rather tricky to get to the next capacity point. There was a lot of discussion internally because, of course, a company of size of Maxtor with a 9% margin, I was used to 30%, 40%, double, triple. I mean, I remember once that someone said at Digital back in its heyday, if it's not 5-to-1 margin, you know, we're not going to make, it's not worth it.
Price to cost.
Price to cost, but not worth it. So now we went back to 8-9%, and we had a lot of pressure. The engineering group had a lot of pressure to get the product out. Sometimes we had some issues, you know. So I was, as VP of quality for some of those products, many times I went to, boy, those Koreans are really something. They, as customers, yeah. Hyundai, Daewoo, and some of those companies, you know, they really demanded quick satisfaction. And so my mission those days was to stall the customer by trying to sell him on what Maxtor was trying to do and what we're doing. And I was being pretty honest, not to a fault, you know, trying to explain what the problem was and what Maxtor was going to do. So I did that for a couple years. I worked for Maxtor a total of 5 years.
Okay.
Then in 1999, Mike Cannon, the CEO, through my boss, asked if I could take on the responsibility for Y2K. Again, the reason is because big companies, there was a big concern that everything was going to stop. We're going to have huge interruptions in manufacturing.
Right.
And companies, very big customers of Maxtor's like IBM, were threatening that if you don't prove to us that you're serious about this Y2K business, we're going to go to someone else. You know. So I worked on that from mid 1999, I would say about July, August timeframe, until, of course, January.
Right.
You know,
the big day.
The big day, right. And we visited, me and my team visited suppliers all over the world, you know. I couldn't do all of it myself, sure. So we had 2 or 3 groups that we were dispatching them. And then we had to coordinate, of course, everything with manufacturing. We had satellite phones, we had command centers, you know, with, I remember it's a command center room. We had portable generators outside so that we never miss power, and it was really quite a production. But we pulled it off, and the important thing is, nothing, as we know, nothing much happened.
Nothing happened, right.
However, but it's mindset, The important thing is that while we're leading up to January 1, people began to turn around. You know, so we have people from various customers call and tell Mike and others, and a VP of marketing and sales, and saying that, hey, you know, Maxtor is really serious about this. And good. So we saved so as a, if you will, reward. No, I mean, what I did before I got to Y2K, from quality, I went to work for, even though for new products introduction. Okay, new products introduction, which reported to Vic Gibson, who was a vice president, senior vice president, executive VP of engineering. And the reason he was under engineering, the way Maxtor worked things out, is because you wanted to have your development teams. You know, there was vice presidents of different categories of working with new products introduction, because there's so much, had to be so much common interface. That's another lesson that I learned, a lot of experience, because we're developing the new process for the drives. So that's another perspective now of the disk drive business. As I was, and it was not always roses. I mean, now I was manufacturing, right? And we know from years working with manufacturing how my engineering blames manufacturing and vice versa if something bad happens. So we got through that.
Any interesting anecdotes about that?
Well, they're not pleasant. They're not pleasant because, again, under pressure, engineering would say, what are you talking about? The product's ready. I mean, we've had alpha and beta sites working for X amount of time. But the process, when you put it together, I said, there's no process for doing the assembly, let's say, of the head-to-media interface, which is always the trickiest part, right? It doesn't work. You know, we have failures. We have, God forbid, intermittent failures. They wouldn't agree, you know. So the only time it got pleasant is when the factory started shipping it. Factory now is in Singapore. So after we developed the process in Longmont, working with engineering, now I had another group of people that I had to sometimes confrontations with. I had to release a process to Singapore. So they would send a team over in, I had about 150 people that time. Many of them assembly technicians and all that stuff, not just manufacturing engineers, but we had to train the people, package and ship the process, and then follow through, you know, while the process, sometimes, and of course we always strived, and that's where some of the I don't want to call it confrontations, disagreements took place, because we had to strive, and that was part of my job, to make sure that we don't revolutionize a process, because then that's money, okay? I learned the value of 50 cents, 10 cents, or 5 cents. When you make 50,000 a month now, right? 5 cents can be a matter of making money or not, you know, in this kind of volumes. So that was another, and I did that for until '99. Okay, when I transferred to to do the Y2K, and then Y2K I would like to think as a reward, because after that I said, what the hell am I going to do when I go back? Because those jobs, I lost. All the other jobs were filled up, and and Maxtor was not IBM or DEC in the heyday or so, to have other opportunities. Coincidentally, Maxtor saw the opportunity to also go into the storage systems business, not be just a drive manufacturer, right? Storage systems. So they bought a company in, I think it was in San Jose, or maybe Milpitas. It was a company in Milpitas. It was a startup company. Had about 50, 60 people. And they were developing hardware and software. And they had a little server. And they were using disk drives, which Maxtor saw an opportunity to use Maxtor disk drives now. And then built was one board of interface and electronics and software. So these guys, the company that they were buying the disk drives, of course, but they had built their own computer and interface electronics that was running under their software.
What was the name of the company? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I don't remember. It's a small company. So what I was asked to do, Vic Gibson left his job in Colorado, and he asked me to run the new products introduction in Yeah, but actually it was not the same as we were doing for the disk drives, right? It was new products introduction, because what Maxtor wanted to do is use the software and hardware design and create a Maxtor server.
Right.
Okay. And so I did that a couple of years. And
so Maxtor started to ship that product then?
Yes, it started to ship that product. There was a big disappointment. Dell showed a lot of interest for that product, and I felt so sorry for Vic Gibson. Somehow he got the impression someone was playing him. Got the impression that Dell was going to buy it, okay? And we're looking at thousands selling it. I mean, it was a nice little product. In fact, they gave me one when I left, which I don't have. But it was a nice product, and somehow there was an internal, within Dell, there was an internal conflict between people. Someone else took the job that Vic was working with, the interface, and I fell through. And that was a big disappointment. And then Maxtor tried to work with other people, but nothing like the kind of volumes that we would have realized, which would really set Maxtor up, because those days Dell was doing extremely well. They're still doing well, but they have a lot more competition now.
Right.
So anyway, about 2001. Early 2001, I remember it was April 2001, because of course September 11th was 2001. So in April 2001, Steve Katrosser, did you know Steve Katrosser?
Sure. Oh yeah.
Yeah. He was a member of the board of InPhase. They had set up this startup company in Colorado, comprised of ex-Bell Labs people working with holographic technology. They had developed a media, and that was the big problem with holography. I mean, holographic technology has been around for a long time, but what was missing in terms of exploiting it is to develop a media, the kind of media that retains the information. Because, I mean, they would write on the media, and then typically within an hour it'd be gone, okay, or less. So they did make tremendous breakthroughs at Bell Labs. So Bell Labs gave 50 patents, I remember, to a group of scientists, and they were able to get enough money to start a company in Boulder. So Steve Katrosser got involved as one of the board of directors. Steve recommended Nelson, and Nelson came after me. There was nothing at the time. There was like about a dozen people, and I was hired. They asked me to build an engineering group and productize it. So that's what I did, and I started in April of 2001. And I worked for the next 5 years for InPhase until I retired.
So why was this going to be an interesting product? It was optical storage.
Well, it was interesting for a number of reasons. One, I thought the technology was extremely interesting, even though, again, holographic, we've known Ford has been doing holograms of new cars for 20 years, but no one had ever attempted to use holography. And the concept of holography, recording instead of longitudinal recording, volumetric recording. The same spot, which is the size of a laser beam diameter, right? And that was green. Eventually we went to blue, but green, you can put all kinds of layers by changing the intensity of a laser, spatial light modulator with the data, changing the intensity. We can theoretically, you can write several layers. And one of our PhDs that we hired subsequently to impress the customers said you can put 200 terabytes on a 5 1/4 size disk.
Mm-hmm.
That was theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
He was assuming so many layers and using violet beam sizes. That's easier said than done. You know, the big difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
We started out with the premise that this was going to be a 5 1/4 disk drive. As you asked why it's interesting, so number one was the technology, and number two was the opportunity to hire a team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like starting.
Right.
You know, I felt energized. You know, just put together a team.
But the ultimate idea was more capacity, more performance.
Both.
Both. Okay.
Both. You know, because once you position the way you could record volumetrically, you don't move.
Yeah.
Once you, plus you did not have to have a rotating disk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can actually take a stationary disk and then move the beam.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you could do so many different things with this kind of, and you came in and saw it once.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so the premise was that it will be a 5 1/4. In fact, we had a mock-up, and we used to take it at shows at Las Vegas, you know, and show it to people, and these little blinking lights. And but in reality, going from a washing machine, which was the prototype, really crude early prototype that Bell Labs, that's how they demonstrated that they can record on that medium.
Okay.
Just one spot. So the original specifications were going to put 200 gigabytes. And that was the original specification, and so much transfer rate. The transfer rate was, I don't know, 15 megabytes per second or something like that. I mean, very, very fast. Mm-hmm. And as we started developing the actual hardware, mm-hmm. you know, the OMA, OMA was the acronym for the positioning mechanism.
Okay.
Okay. They we discovered that the most important aspect of productizing this technology is have a reliable positioning mechanism.
Okay.
Because you had to move the beam, two beams, you know, one is the data and one is the positioning beam, mm-hmm. and then you had to especially interchange. We were able to write, but interchanging is where it became much more challenging. Mm-hmm. Okay, then it was clear that 5 1/4 was out of reach. Yeah. Not for the first product. Mm-hmm. We could see ways of getting there someday, mm-hmm. and even smaller. Productizing it once we got the technology to work reliably, productizing it at different kind of form factors with different positioning techniques. Like I was saying before, a technique where you have very tiny square that media that doesn't move, and then you have to position. Mm-hmm. You know. So the best we could do is half rack. And we did build some machines, beta machines for half rack. Our original partner was Storage Tech. We knew that this was going to be a library product. Okay. And we went to Storage Tech, and we were working with them, putting the units in they're doing a new library. You remember the libraries that Storage Tech was doing with the big robots, and and so that was going to be a petabytes, you know, mm-hmm. Capacity. And they were working with us, you know. We had beta units running, although not to spec. We never got to 200 gigabytes.
Okay. How far did you get?
50.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We had a long way to go.
Yeah.
Okay. But we could see getting to that capacity, yeah. But interchange, because the positioning the beam the beam itself was fine, you know. We're using blue lasers. We got to the blue lasers, and they companies in Japan. I was there most of the time. They were were able to make the blue lasers. I mean, Sony. We had Sony blue lasers. They had already introduced the Blu-rays, you know, and they were interested in the media. Okay, because as long as they could see us getting somewhere, then they, Taiwan, were for manufacturing. We used a company called Light-On. They're still in business. Very high volume manufacturer of consumer products. They do CDs, DVDs, and stuff like that. But the interchange became an issue.
Now, does that mean interchange between drives, or take it out and put it back?
Well, taking out and putting back, yes, that's how we started, but between drives was the big problem. Being able to reproduce accurately the position, you know. So I, by that time, I had been commuting a year and a half between Denver and April of 2006, I turned over 65. And I told Nelson that there was another problem at the time. I was the original engineering manager. The board of directors was not pleased with the progress because they wanted return on investment. They had already put in more money. We ended up, all told, 120 million and went into that company.
Yeah, interesting.
And it still needed a lot more money. Then there's the economic situation was getting constrained, although not bad at the time. So there was every hope that we would get there. I mean, we could see a path, not with a 5 1/4, but a half rack. They were beginning to advertise it. Liz Murphy, the VP of Sales and Marketing, and I went to budget. We were trying to sell it, and we had pretty good success to the movie industry. They were going to get rid of all this tape, you know, the magnetic tape, and shrink the amount of warehouses, and we told them they can keep the storage medium, the holographic storage medium, for 50 years, you know, because they were interested in longevity. So we had pretty good success, but then they wanted results. When can we see it? Okay, so the other thing is that the board of directors felt, and I was a officer, because although I was not a founder, I was, you know, so I had pretty good investment in the company. I had every hope that it will succeed. You know, in addition to me getting older and commuting, and because I was going every week, Nelson and I agreed that maybe I was over 65, let's get somebody else. You know, all the stars are lining up, you know, and the planets. It's time, you know, to move on.
Yeah.
You know, so it was a joint decision. The board agreed. So in June 1 was my last day in 2006. So I left. The company was still going, and 2 years later they closed.
They couldn't raise enough
2008.
money.
You know, couldn't raise any more money.
Interesting. So it was, you know, really had some high horsepower technology behind it.
Oh yes.
But getting it into a product turned out to be a real difficult challenge.
It was a challenge, and again, the positioning. The other thing is not only another problem, believe it or not, is we started thinking about service those units in the field, because lasers and other parts of that actuator mechanism, that positioning mechanism, sometimes fail. So how do you design a field replaceable with this type of accuracy on an interchange product, you know, a removable disk product. How do you design a mechanism that a field service engineer with minimum training can replace?
Could do that.
Yeah. It turned out that we were going to have a spare, essentially the whole drive minus the electronics, in order to make it easy for someone to replace it in the field. We talked about sending the drives back, you know, but as you know, that's not good for business.
Right.
You know, you can't really send the drive back to have it fixed or upgraded in the field. So there's a number of issues. Also, Lydon, as a manufacturing partner, was complaining, you know, that they needed more. We were pushing them, and yet we could see that we're not really there yet ready to start building, because we're pushing them to buy parts. Okay, so it's all because of the pressure. We were from the investor's standpoint, we were late. We were late because they were promised that within 5 years from day one, okay, from 2001, within 5 years we will be shipping product. And the marketing people, a couple of guys, we had marketing, they had made all kinds of beautiful progressions, you know, how they charts and graph, you know how that works. But you know, it wasn't happening.
Right. So out of that experience, would you give any advice to other people trying to start up a storage company?
Depends what technology you're using. I consider two types of technologies. One is evolutionary and two is revolutionary. What we're trying to do at InPhase was definitely revolutionary. All the other magnetic technologies, yes, they all have challenges, but it was evolutionary. You build on something that you already have some knowledge and experience with, but there was no knowledge and experience at all on building a holographic storage product. Now, do I believe that the technology can be made to work? Yes, I do, but not by a small company.
Okay. Yep. Takes a lot of resources.
Oh.
And patience.
And a lot of money.
Yeah.
And patience, absolutely.
Do you think if whatever amount of money it would have taken would have been worthwhile?
I think if we had been bought out, and I'm not sure if there were some rumors. I was not part of the discussions that companies had approached, Japanese companies had approached InPhase to sell, and they declined. If a big company like IBM at the time, or a big Japanese company like 3M, they were looking to, if they had put their might behind that and really bring a lot of people, focus on the different parts. I mean, we had very few, you couldn't find enough holographic design engineer experts.
Right, sure.
You know, but a large company with a lot of resources could have attracted people, would have done a lot of things to converge towards building a group of people dedicated to making. The other thing that was happening is with Nintendo. Those days was, of course, very secret. Came in and asked InPhase, while was struggling to develop the base product. Now they wanted a 3.5-inch form factor holographic storage device for their future game, because they needed, of course, games. They need a lot of storage, right, for the graphics. So they wanted to be first in industry, that it will have a little 3.5-inch form factor drive that can have terabytes. You know, so
and proprietary media.
And proprietary media.
Nobody could copy it.
Right, that's right. So they started pulling us in different directions, and all that, of course, because the business people did not want to lose any potential, business potential. And InPhase was not set up to be spread.
Yeah. focuses everything.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So you kind of retired at that point. What happened? The company went on for 2 more years.
2 more years.
Then what happened?
The company went on for 2 more years, and I was watching on the website, on the InPhase website, what they were doing. They were publishing articles. I mean, they were going to a number of different shows, right? And they began to focus on. They had beautiful renderings of the half rack unit, right? And they were demonstrating disk interchange, part of it. As far as I know, they never got to the 200 gigabytes.
Okay.
But you could, if you were to come and look at the product, you could see that there was definitely a path to get in there.
Yeah.
And then if you said when, if you were a customer, the next month. If you were someone with a company, it would be maybe a couple years,
Right.
So it was converging. It was converging. But a big infusion that was needed about the time where the company shut down is another. After I left, the relationship with Lighten from Taiwan, beginning to sour. And there was a concern that what the Taiwanese were doing are trying to milk our engineers and especially the Bell Labs people for technical information. And we were giving them everything. So someone said, hey, not anymore. So the other problem was the distance.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Nelson and Company said after I left, we're going to start manufacturing here.
Yeah.
Okay, so what InPhase did is they acquired the other half of the building, which some other company had, so they left, and they set up. The intent was to set up manufacturing, and then start with 10 a month, 20 a month, 50 a month, and go to specific. But to do that, which most of it had to be handmade, right? You need a lot of money and a lot of people.
Right.
And this is where it stopped.
Right. And at that point, the magnetic disk drive industry is catching up.
We're thinking about the super paramagnetic effect. Remember that? This was going to stop. I mean, because then the bits, the magnetic transitions were going to get so close that they will be canceling each other out.
Right.
And some of the experts were saying, you guys, this is dream on. That ain't going to happen. And we were saying that when the bit density was, a tenth of what it is today.
Yeah, right.
Right. The super paramagnetic effect, that's going to kill the disk. We need another technology.
Right.
That
marched right through it.
That's right. Went right through it, and the magnetic storage technology, the traditional, it was not, how many terabytes now there?
Well, you can get at least 4, if not 8.
Yeah.
In a single 3.5-inch form factor.
We didn't think maybe 500 gigabytes we thought was going to be the end.
Yeah, right.
And this is for us, for the holographic storage, that's the beginning.
Yeah, right.
So we were convinced that this was going to be the transition.
Right. Well, that's been a historical issue with how the promise of optical kind of gets caught up in the onward march of magnetic.
Yeah.
And so far, the CD-ROM and the Blu-ray and so on have been hugely successful, but not as a computer storage medium.
Yes, I was going to say as a commercial products, for gaming and stuff like that, but not as storage. I mean, the discs are still just like the people are trying to kill tape for so many decades, right? If it was up to them, that thinking, tape would have been dead 50 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yep.
And every time they find a way to sustain it.
Yep. You can't be cheaper than sitting on a shelf.
Right. That's right.
Yep. So you have retired and enjoying the retirement here in Sarasota, Florida?
Yes. Yes. Ever since we came to Florida, I mean, I could have retired in Colorado, but for health reasons, we found out that Florida is better for us. And I mean, we live near the water, and I have diversified myself by working for a number of I volunteer for a number of different local organizations, and I feel good about that because they need the help. And plus, I find some different and interesting things to do that I'd never done before. I never thought about doing before. There's plenty of sailing here, which is my hobby. I wanted to sail, never got the opportunity to go long distance sailing, so I have done that. And for the boarding organization I belong to, I teach all the electronics courses.
Okay.
You know, I mean, they call them marine electronic systems, marine communication systems, and marine navigation systems. Okay. Okay. Not how to use them, how they work. Okay. So, because USPS, that's United States Power Squadrons. Right. USPS, that's the kind of focus they have on education. And the three electronics courses that I have are electives. Okay. You know, I have taken all the courses because it's like the university, so I'm a senior navigator. I mean, I've taken all the courses, and now occasionally I can do piloting and some, I mean, the basic safety course, I help teaching that one. And that's how we generate membership. Because we have anywhere from 12 to 25 people every month or every other month that we offer it. Okay. You know, so we get new members that way. So yes, between that and we have plenty of cultural events here.
Are you still involved with the Sheriff's Department? Hmm? You're involved with the Sheriff's Department?
No, Sarasota Police Department.
Sarasota Police Department.
Yes.
Okay.
So police, as a patrol officer.
Oh, interesting.
We have our cruiser. I have a cruiser with a partner. Okay. Volunteers don't go out by themselves. Yeah, yeah. No weapons other than the radio, but we have a uniform. We write citations, parking citations, another opportunity to deal with the public, but no one is happy getting a ticket.
A real slice of life, huh?
Yeah. So yes, and then I volunteer for the hospital. Sarasota Memorial Hospital is one of the best in the country. It's, I think, among the top 5. Recently, they evaluated it. And I'm a transporter. That means I transport people on stretchers from their rooms to the operating rooms and back, and then transport blood and cultures, right. Stuff like that. Right. So every day I get something to do. Makes life go. Yeah. The only disadvantage with being too busy is time flies. Yeah, yeah. I don't know, since I retired, and I was worried about that, you know, that I wouldn't have enough to do. Yep. But actually sometimes I may be, I'm also president of our condo association. And this is my 4th year. So I'm busy. I am
Certainly
busy.
Sounds like it. That's great.
Yeah, and I like it, but time flies. Yeah, yeah.
Well, terrific. Yeah. A wonderful career and a great retirement. What could be better?
Yes. Well, we have a nice life.
Yeah.
We have a nice life, Grant. My wife and I. Yeah, and so all said and done, you know, we're healthy. Yeah. Yeah. Could have been worse, of course. Sure. We have a lot of friends here that are not so lucky. Yeah. Right. You know, yeah. But all in all, we have a nice life.
Terrific. Well, thanks very much. It was wonderful chatting with you and refreshing some old memories that, you know, we shared together. And,
yeah, I know.
And many that were, you know, your stories. So thanks very much.
We were together for decades.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
So thank you too.